is going to be. I'll try to talk close. I have to work on the other one. We're going to go over this, which I went over with a microphone the other day. But because I was 90, you can't hear if it's going to work or not. And I was 90% sure it was not. You can't hear until it's done recording. It just felt so silly to hold it. And it was very hard to take this seriously. Not that we should take anything seriously, okay? Take seriously, I don't give advice. What I take seriously is taking care of my animals, taking care of myself, feeling a connection to a source that I call God, doing things that are in service of other people, outside of everything that I do in service of my animals and myself, etc. Let's not get sidetracked. So this is this is from Wikipedia. District of Columbia Organic Act of 1871. So I was born and raised in Georgetown, so it was interesting. I heard somewhere that the United States is a corporation, that it's either an LLC or an S Corp or an E Corp, something located on Bradley and Dunn Street. And I always remembered that in my head for some reason to look it up. And I looked it up and a lot of other stuff. First thing that came up was this. I don't know. Easy. I don't know how reliable this source is. Bibliotech. Hello. Bibliotech. Master file. Federal government. It's called the illegal quasi government in Washington, D.C. The federal government is a separate nation and should be called the United States Incorporated. Okay. So, oh, by the way, and stop with you're just, so the word ignorance, if you're ignorant to something, you don't have the information. You don't understand, you don't have a working understanding of subject. If you're ignorant to a subject. A conspiracy theory. The term conspiracy theory was coined by the CIA. That's the Central Intelligence Agency. So they coined this term so that people would be called something when things got out. You're demonstrating ignorance when you say, oh, it's a conspiracy theory in a demeaning way. So I think there should be another term for false information. Maybe that's it, fake news. But the illegal quasi-government in Washington, D.C. I read that part. This awareness. So semantics. Oh, I was going to say there could be another thing for that, but then that's just semantics anyway, isn't it? The illegal quasi-government in Washington, D.C. Oh, in the beginning. This awareness indicates there are two governments operating in this country. The United States of America is the republic government created by the states for the states, created by the people for the people. The republic government. Second bullet point. And the second, there is the U.S. government, which is a corporate government or corporation. This federal government should not be called the United States of America. It should be called the United States of America Incorporated. Corporations are not allowed by law to become politically charged in terms of their controls over the masses of a region. I was like, did I do my makeup? Did I do my makeup right? A corporation is simply an entity which makes its own rules for its own employees structural operation. It's just rain, guys. Calm down. The U.S. government, which is a 10-acre parcel of property in Washington, D.C., District of Columbia, outside of the United States of America, is a corporation that has taken on the role of quasi-government, but which has no legal authority to do so. This awareness indicates that any action whereby this quasi-government, known as the United States federal government, attempts to make laws, to impose laws on the states, on the people, or on the people that have not been authorized by the states of the people operates illegally. This awareness indicates that any of the states or the people who give their allegiance and their rights to such a quasi-government are doing so illegally and probably unknowingly. Anyone who volunteers to let a foreign entity control their lives is volunteering their freedom away illegally, and this is where changes will soon begin to occur and where entities will begin to recognize a full breach in the relationship between the people, the states, and the quasi-government in Washington, D.C. I googled, does Washington, D.C. own me if I was born in Washington, D.C.? And there's all this stuff, like if you're born in Washington, D.C., you're an American citizen. Those are like the first things that come up. Where was I? Okay. So, the government, which is foreign to the United States of America, which is located in the District of Columbia, which is not part of the United States, and which is in fact controlled to a great extent by international bankers. International bankers? Really? You don't even give me like, I mean, I know what that means, but can you guys understand that? By international bankers. Okay. Um, and by the laws and rules of the United Nations. Um, whereby the federal Washington, D.C. state or country, you see how they use language, has set itself up to control over, it's set itself up as a control over the United States of America as a quasi-government. This awareness indicates that the elected officials residing outside the United States of America in Washington, D.C. Outside of the United States in D.C. I continue. The state's rules do not apply. The state's constitution do not apply to these entities in Washington, D.C. First thing I just thought of was diplomatic plates. So many stories growing up of like diplomats driving drunk, killing people, all this shit, nothing happens to them. Because they are acting outside the country in this second nation known as the federal government. So the federal government is essentially a nation in and of itself, located within Washington, D.C. Okay. This awareness indicates, in other words, the United States federal government and the United States of America are basically two different countries. And the Constitution of the United States of America is not the law of the United States federal government. Therefore, these entities cannot, while the District of Columbia, be accused of treason. They are operating on behalf of foreign bankers and special interests. That's maybe why all of the, what do you call them? Embassies are in DC. I remember partying in high school, and like there were a lot of like in middle, all the schools I went to, there was like ambassadors' daughters and sons and stuff. We went to the ambassador, I mean the what do you call it? Embassy of Spain. We went to a party there and we were all like juniors. We were like 17, 18. I remember my boyfriend Juan, who was a senior at that time. And we were allowed to drink alcohol, even though 21 is the drinking age, up like it was on Massachusetts Avenue, which is like where most of the embassies are. And the police were outside and people like were figuring out how to drive. This before Uber, it's like 1998. But we could, and like in front of the embassy is like the size of my apartment more, and like cops were out there, but they couldn't come past that line. It was like literally, it would be like crossing onto like Spain. I remember that. People were like drinking beers and stuff, like on the lawn. Again, yeah, lawn would be the word, but it's more like a massive, you know, it's like whatever. We'll talk about that another time. All right. Next. The point and always the thing to remember is just to stay with God. There's nothing to be afraid of. Except fear itself, right? Okay, so they bring up freedoms here, so that perks my attention. Most entities are unaware of vanishing freedoms. So who are entities, you know? Or what is entities? The awareness indicates essentially these so-called freedoms, quote unquote. Bitch, I will die before I'm not free. That's just for anyone. That entities have enjoyed or believe they have are taken away without the public even realizing they are being taken. It is though an entity is unheard. Oh, sorry. Is though it is it. It is as though an entity ushered into prison by a very powerful hypnotist. Interesting verbiage. And one who is very persuasive, who talks the entity along as he walks him towards the prison, and who even walks the entity into the gate and into the cell. Okay. Thanks for your opinion, dude. Why don't you just make a fucking excuse me haiku about that one? Walks the entity into the gate and into the cell before the entity awakes and finds himself imprisoned. Let me just add. And then he's getting it in the booty. In the booty. Wait, that's for Chris. Just kidding. Doesn't say the booty part, but everything but. Don't drop the soap bar. It becomes important for entities to recognize the next risk to be communicating with persons of their own interest. If they are interested in the patriot movement, then it is important that they risk communicating with such entities. If you can't escape the reality by ignoring it. There are many entities who live in denial right up to the time when they face okay. So entities, I guess, is people or sheeple, whatever. For the woke people. Some U.S. states seeking sovereignty, the United States of America Incorporated. The federal government sees itself as a democracy, whereas the original states of the Union were a republic. The republic is no longer recognized by the democracy known as the United States of America. It should be understood that democracy essentially is majority rule, or what some call mob rule. And a republic is a system of government that is focused on the right excuse me, of each individual. The rules are such to be protective rights of the individuals, not so much the mob or the majority, but the individuals that make up the whole. This awareness indicates that these things that most entities are not taught in their school. I was going to get to that. Or not the news through television or through the ordinary information sources of the country. It should be realized that the United States of America Incorporated is dominated and controlled by 13 powerful banking families. The Rothschilds being a dominant influence, so that the laws are passed to help the freedoms of the states. Most of the laws of the federal government are essentially just corporate rules. And corporate laws on the states who have become associated with the federal government. It just popped in my mind the flag that says Republic of California. Given their allegiance or otherwise bought into federal government in Washington, D.C., a corporation. The government in Washington, D.C. is not set up to represent the states, but to control the states, as though they were subordinate corporations to this greater corporation. That makes sense. Excuse me. It's not COVID, it's cannabis. So there's that. And the conspiracy theory that it was repealed is just that, a conspiracy theory. It was never repealed. Just so y'all know. God owns my soul. Alright, that's enough for now. We'll talk later. I'm gonna do a live, and it's just gonna be called Yes No. So you guys can ask me questions. So think of that, and I'll just answer yes, no. Especially if this audio sucks. It's really rainy and sweet in LA. Happy holidays!